What is going on, you guys? My name is Justin, but you can call me J Swag, and welcome back to another episode of Sports Talk with Swag. Appreciate you stopping by, giving a listen, and hanging out with us here this afternoon. It's a special. It's sports lunch with Swag, or lunch talk with Swag, or something like that. We're live at a special time. It's 12:20 p.m. here on the Eastern Coast of the United States of America on Thursday, January 21st. And I didn't go live last night. You know, we usually do the live episodes Wednesday nights for the new episodes, but I was just too tired last night, honestly, and I wasn't feeling very good. So wasn't sure if I was going to do it tomorrow, like tonight, or just kind of postpone the episode again. But woke up feeling good today, and I was like, you know what? Let's try out like a little lunchtime episode, see if people can get behind that. So that's what we're doing. So if you're here live in the YouTube stream, make sure to say hi in the chat and let me know what you're eating for lunch today. But yeah, so without wasting any of your or my time, we'll kind of just get right to it. Today we are talking about the NBA and whether or not they should postpone their season, because the coronavirus. They've had to cancel, or not cancel, but postpone a lot of games. So I'll get more into the specifics in a little bit. But yeah, I was originally going to talk about this last week because it was starting to become a little bit more out of control right around this time last week. But then the Rockets decided to trade James Harden. So I kind of had to scrap that and talk about that trade. So make sure you head over to that episode and listen to that if you want to get my thoughts on that. But yeah, so we are going to read an article from the New York Times via Mark Stein of the New York Times. He wrote an article about a week and a half ago, so I've tried to put notes in just to kind of keep it as up to date as I can. But really, the baseline principles of the article are still the same. But yeah, so without further ado, let's kind of get into it, and I'll just kind of share my thoughts as we go along here. So again, this is via Mark Stein of the New York Times. And he writes, NBA players will be required to spend at least the next 2 weeks in their homes, apart from leaving for games, practices, and essential activities, and will be mostly prohibited from leaving their hotels on the road as part of a new range of coronavirus protocols approved Tuesday by the league and their players' union. Again, this is from about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And to add to that, they have also now said, well, they're having security at the arenas enforce no hugging between players post-game or with anyone else, really, which I'll give my thoughts on that after we kind of make it through this. The NBA has postponed 5 games this week, and that ended up being 9 for that week. And as a total, they've postponed 15 games so far this season in response to its growing coronavirus crisis, which has depleted multiple teams' rosters. The new measures supplement the nearly 160 pages of health and safety guidelines that guide the league's attempt to stage a season at teams' home arenas without the protective, restricted campus engineered at Walt Disney World near Orlando, Florida, over the summer to complete the 2019-20 season. The changes include, until at least January 26th, players, coaches, and team staff members are required to remain at home when in their home markets unless they are attending team-related activities, exercising outside, performing essential activities, or going out for what the league termed extraordinary circumstances. Also, for at least the next 2 weeks, when away from team activities, players should avoid interacting with people who do not live or regularly work on their homes. On the road, players and staff will be prohibited from leaving the team hotel except for team activities or emergencies and will be barred from interacting with non-team guests at the hotel. Players were previously permitted to host up to 2 guests in their hotel rooms, provided they were family members or long-standing personal friends. Face coverings are now mandatory for players on the bench at all times, except when players sit in cool-down chairs after exiting a game that are at least 12 feet away from the main bench area. Players are also required to wear masks in the locker rooms, during strength and conditioning activities, and while traveling with anyone out of their household. Before and after games, players are only allowed to greet each other with elbow or fist bumps. They have been asked to avoid extended socializing. Specific penalties for violations have not been made public. Before the new measures were announced Tuesday, Orlando's game Wednesday at Boston was postponed. It was the league's 4th postponement since Sunday and the 3rd involving the Celtics. In recent days, Boston has listed at least half a dozen players as unavailable under the league's health and safety protocols, meaning they have either tested positive for the coronavirus or have been exposed to someone who has. No one wants to see more restrictions imposed, Michelle Roberts, the head of the Players Association, said in a statement provided to the New York Times and other media outlets. No one also wants to see the infection rate increase if there are steps we can take to mitigate the risk. Our experts have concluded that these new procedures will add to our arsenal of weapons against the virus. It would be irresponsible and unacceptable to not employ new measures aimed at better promoting and protecting our players' safety. So there you have it. So the big thing here was that they put in new restrictions. And it's essentially, again, it's basically players have to wear masks. Everyone has to wear masks on the bench. Originally, it was just coaching staff and team member, like crew members, like they're like trainers and stuff. But now they've extended that to all players on the bench until the 26th of January, which I believe is this upcoming Tuesday. Players have had to stay in their homes and not leave unless it's for like practice or a team-related activity. And we saw kind of how they handle that when that happens. When we saw Kyrie Irving and his whole debacle, where he went to a family birthday party that was like in a club, I think, and no one was wearing masks. And, he was fined a little bit and sat a couple games, but he's back now on the team. So, they did an internal investigation into it, everything. It took like a couple days, if not a week, actually. So at the end of the day, I think it's probably just going to end up resulting in fines. And if it's like egregious, it may result in a suspension, but it's probably just going to be fines, which, as we've seen in professional sports, really doesn't change behaviors that much. And then on the road, they basically just have to stay in the team hotel, again, except for team activities. And they've changed it now so that instead of they were allowed to have 2 guests with them, they're not allowed to have any people with them who are not part of the team. So it's a really tough position. This is why I want to do this episode, so I could basically just think out loud. But goodbye the NBA for realizing that they have a problem on their hands and for doing something to try to fix it. But one has to wonder, is it worth it? I think at the end of the day. And I think most people just, on the surface level are going to say yes, because they're still getting to do what they love and do their jobs, and we're still able to have our entertainment and be able to watch TV and have life feel as normal as possible. And I'm not going to deny that fact, because it does make everything feel more normal. And I love having NBA back to be able to watch basketball, as I'm sure all sports fans are, with football and hockey and soccer and everything being back on TV, and basically back into full swing, but just minus fans for the most part, because we've even seen that I think there's 5 different teams in the NBA who are allowing fans into the arena. I mean, they're none of them are like selling out. They're cutting off the capacity, but they're still allowing fans in there. So it begs the question of, is it worth it? And we've seen already they've had 15 different games postponed, and a lot of different players have already tested positive. I think probably close to 30 different players this season have already tested positive for the virus, which is already not a great number. But it's just so stark in contrast compared to when they were in the bubble and they didn't have a single positive test for 3 months, 3.5 months. So it's tough to have that perspective, because you can look at it. If you just look at it for this season, it's like, well, they're being safe and not real. Most of them aren't allowing any fans, but any of the teams that are allowing fans, they're just having a very small capacity in there, and they're spreading them out and all that stuff. And they have to wear masks. They're making the players wear masks now when they're not on the court. They're not letting them, basically touch each other except for like elbow bumps after the game, and trying to get them to not really talk and converse anymore at midcourt. Players have to isolate for either 10 or 14 days after, they test positive, and then test negative before they're allowed back. They're taking a lot of precautions. They're going along with it. It started off one way and they've adjusted as they've gone on. And so, when you look at that, you're like, all right, well, it seems like they're doing what they can, and they're definitely being, self-aware of what's going on, and they're conscious of the different threats. But it's really hard to kind of get behind that when you have the memory and the, I don't even know what to call it, but just like they had something so good last year where they had a period of 3.5 months where there wasn't a single positive test. But then that gets tough because it's like, well, sure, of course the bubble worked. I mean, really, when you think about it, it's like, how could the bubble not work? Everyone just went to the same place, isolated until everyone tested negative, and then you just weren't allowed to leave. So of course that's going to work. It's a homogenous micro community, I think is the word. But of course you can't logically, ask for all these players and staff members and coaches to spend, let's see, they started this season end of December. So January, February, March, April, May, at least 6 months away from their families entirely. To do that, like, it's just, no one would sign up to do that. That's just ridiculous. And those who may not have, a family to stay with, their own family, whatever, they still have like their friends and their personal lives that they don't want to give up for 6 months minimum. Well, maybe at least 4.5 months, 4.5 to 5 months minimum. Like, you just can't ask that. And like, I don't think anyone was expecting that to happen, but it's like, well, if you're not going to do that though, how can you then kind of give us the same guarantee of like, we're going to minimize the spread of the virus? Especially when it's like, you can't control these players. Like, it's just tough because it's like, you want them to be as stringent and strict and responsible as possible. But at the same time, like, you don't own these people. You can't tell them what to do. Like, they're grown adults, who are the reason, that your industry and your company exists. So you can't just like tell them what to do. Like, they're grown people. They're going to make their own decisions and do what they want. So, there's only so much you can control. So it's just, it just goes back and forth. It's tough. It's a really tough situation. And so when you look at it as a whole, at least for me, I'll say, when I look at it, this current NBA season, I definitely don't look at it as a failure. And I don't think it's like, wow, like they're just blinded by the money. But it seems like it's like they're definitely their site is hindered by it. I'll say. I think I think they could have been a little more creative with how to get this to work. Um, I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but you could have done like, all right, we're going to start the season in mid January. Like the original, like what a lot of the players wanted was for it to start this past Monday on Martin Luther King Day. That's when they wanted their opening day to be. But the NBA and the owners really pushed for late December. So let's say you just start it Martin Luther King Day. So you allow the players um, a full 2 months at least of rest and off season because 22 teams went to the bubble. So the 18 those other 8 teams have been off since March. So they're, going to they they should probably be starting their camps and practices and stuff late December, early January, which will have been 9 months then. But I guess for them, like you can kind of allow them to make those decisions themselves. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the teams in the bubble, the earliest I think they would have gone home would have been in September. And then the latest would have been the Lakers and the Heat, who were there until or I guess early October. So you're giving everyone at least 2.5 months of an off season. And you allow them just to spend their holidays at home with their families. So they have Thanksgiving and Christmas, and New Year's, and Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, just, all those holidays in that season. They just don't have to worry about anything. It's just spend it with your families at home. So they come back, and I think they do another bubble. And I think you can do one, or you can even do two. No interconference games, and just have it be all right. The Western Conference, your bubble is in Vegas, and Eastern Conference, your bubble is at Disney again. And you're gonna do, let's say 6 to 8 weeks of a bubble, right? So you get in like maybe like 15 to 20 games a team. Because again, you don't have to worry about spreading them out too much because there's no travel involved. So they can stay more fresh and energized and all that stuff. And then you give them maybe a break to go home for, 2 to 3 weeks. And then they come back to the bubble in like mid-March. And then they do another 6 to 8 weeks for the regular season. And then regular season's over and everyone's played, let's say you try to get to like 40, 42 games. So at least you're playing like half a season. And then you have the playoffs in a bubble, and maybe you give them another week or two to go home and see their family or friends, or at that point you let them have their family or friends come to the bubbles and stay with them. Or maybe you have that be the whole time, because you're not going to have all 30 teams in one location like they did last year, or 22. You're instead having 15 and 15, but you still rent out a larger space so that they can have their family and friends be there with them. Same protocols where when they come in, they have to isolate for, whatever it was, 24, 48 hours. And they have to test positive. And at that point, then you can also still be testing them, everyone daily. And then by the time you get to, probably when you're heading back into the second bubble, the vaccine should be available for anyone who wants it at that point. So you can work with that too. But I don't know. Again, that's just kind of spitballing, and that's just one idea I had when I was kind of preparing this episode of just like what's a way you can kind of recreate the bubble without it being fully isolating and like super long away from their family and friends and personal lives. I'm sure people listening will probably think of 1,000 different reasons why that's not good or can poke holes in that. Again, it was just a base level thing that I just thought of in like 5 minutes. So and I think when you have the minds that came up with the bubble and everything that went into it and what made it so successful, if you have them that whole off season from October, through December, or even reaching earlier back into when they were in the bubble, they're already planning ahead. I think they can come up with more creative ideas than regular season is going to go on as it normally would, but there's going to be no fans because we've seen in other sports that didn't work super well. So I don't know. It's just at the end of the day, I think at this point it may be smart to maybe put the season on hold again until everyone can get the vaccine. And let me be very clear, I am not saying that NBA players should jump the line. I don't think they should get any sort of special priority, unless, of course, someone within their immediate family, their spouse or one of their children, depending on how old they are, whatever, is at that front of the line and they need to kind of get it to be, for instance, I know there's a lot of teachers who are in kind of at the front of the line who it's them and their spouse get the vaccine. So if there's a situation like that, obviously, but they shouldn't be getting their vaccines before immunocompromised people, essential workers, frontline workers, elderly folks. I think they should still be kind of where just normal citizens are. Yeah, but I don't know. I just think right now we've seen that we're only we're a month into the season, and we've already had to cancel or postpone 15 games, and they've already had a decent amount of positive tests come back. I mean, let's not forget that like the other week the Sixers had to play with 7 players, I think, maybe 8. And like I think that's an issue. I think you can't just be like, well, that's an exception or like that stinks for them or whatever. Like they're only allowed to play with 6 people or 8 people. I just think you need to work with well, I don't know. It's tough. Again, you have so many other things to consider because obviously the owners and arenas and stuff and sponsors are going to be wanting to make their money. But you need to be careful with these players and their families and just the broader general population's safety because the virus is more dangerous and is spreading more rapidly than it literally ever has. And, I don't know. I just think the NBA could be doing more. I don't know. And some of it's frustrating too, to me, that's confusing. Like the players have to wear masks when they're on the bench, which is just so confusing to me because it's like, sure, I guess if you're like injured and you're not going to be playing, like, yeah, may as well wear a mask while you're down there. But like, if you're like James Harden, you start the game, you play 34 minutes out of 48. You're up in people's faces, playing basketball with them. You're going to be exposing or being exposed to the virus at that point. So then having them wear masks on the bench, it just feels like it's almost like a PR move. Because it's like they're already out there breathing and huffing and puffing and spitting and sweating. on other people, like when they're only on the bench for a fourth of that time. I don't know. I guess it's better than nothing, but it just it just feels silly to me. I don't know. Um, yeah, it's just a weird time, and it's a weird time for sports to try to figure out where they stand and where they belong and how they fit in with just like the current climate. Because again, the virus is really really bad right now, but people also kind of, it's nice to have that bit of an escape. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, like I'm not gonna lie, it's really nice to, after a long day or a mentally exhausting day, of being at home again. You know, we're coming up on 10 months now of doing, actually, we're over 10 months now of being kind of in lockdown, more or less. It's nice to be able to turn on an NBA game and just kind of escape to that. And the NBA and those athletes provide it for me. And then other people obviously have that with the NFL or NHL. So I see the draw to wanting to do it, and obviously you want to give these players as much of their normal life as you can, um, and get to do what helps them get by. But it's tough. It's really tough when it's a virus that spreads through, your breath essentially, and these people are all over each other, kind of. So I don't know. It's a tough call. I don't envy being in the position at all of trying to have to make that call. And I do applaud the people who, have been making those decisions and have been in charge of doing that, because it's really tough. Like I said, I just tried to come up with that idea in 5 minutes, and there's so many different things that were probably wrong with it. And there's so many variables to consider. But at the end of the day, I just feel like the NBA really needs to try to objectively do what is best for the general public and for the general public's health, as well as more specifically the players and coaching staffs that they are putting at risk, while they kind of are sitting at home, and not really putting themselves at risk. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know, because I am genuinely very curious as to what other people think, because I could just be on my own and other people are just like, really, it's not that big deal. Like, could be so much worse, or like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is terrible. I can't believe they're even doing this season. Whatever. Let me know. Send an email to sportstalkwithswag@gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts, or hit me up on social media. Twitter, it's STWScast. Instagram and Facebook are Sports Talk with Swag. Make sure you follow all those accounts. And then while you're at it, go ahead and follow the podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Amazon Music. And you can listen to the entire, you can pick out any old episode you want to listen to as well. And yeah, make sure you give us a 5-star review anywhere you can as well. We always appreciate the feedback. So yeah, I appreciate you guys listening. If you were here in the live stream, I appreciate you stopping by. Again, this was just having a little fun and maybe doing some experimenting as well, just different times to go live. So I thought, let's try a lunchtime episode, see how that works. But yeah, so again, thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next episode. Peace.